The Zephyrian Collective had existed for over 10,000 years without knowing what real terror felt like. These crystalline beings lived in perfect harmony across dozens of star systems. Their cities made of living crystal that sang beautiful melodies in the cosmic wind. They were traders, not warriors. Their weapons were meant for mining asteroids, not fighting wars. But on that dark day, everything changed. The outer colony of Velterra went silent first. The crystal singers stopped their eternal songs mid-note. Then Kreshman fell dark. One by one, entire worlds simply vanished from their communication networks, leaving behind only empty space and scattered debris. The survivors spoke of something impossible. Ships made of flesh and bone that moved like living creatures through space. These biovessels didn't just attack planets, they consumed them completely, leaving nothing but hollow husks floating in the void. The Zephyrians called this nightmare the Void Swarm, and it was heading straight for their homeworld. On Earth's orbital monitoring station, Commander Lisa Hayes was finishing her night shift when the emergency alert started screaming. The Deep Space Array had picked up something extraordinary, a distress signal coming from the far edge of known space. But this wasn't just any signal. It was being broadcast on every frequency imaginable, with enough power to reach across half the galaxy. The voice that came through the speakers was unlike anything Hayes had ever heard. It was musical, like wind chimes made of pure starlight, but underneath the beauty was raw panic. The translator struggled to make sense of the alien language, but the emotion was crystal clear. These beings were begging for help. "General Wilson, you need to hear this right now," Hayes called her superior. General Jack Wilson arrived within minutes, his coffee still steaming as he listened to the transmission. The Zephyrians were explaining their situation in broken Galactic standard, their words tumbling over each other in desperate haste. They had already lost 12 colony worlds. Their defense fleets were destroyed or scattered. The Void Swarm would reach their homeworld in less than 3 standard weeks. They were asking no, begging anyone in the galaxy to come to their aid. Wilson pulled up the galactic communication networks, expecting to see dozens of response signals. The great civilizations of the Andorian Empire, the Stellar Federation, even the warrior clans of Proxima, surely someone would answer this call for help. The networks were completely silent. "I'm not reading any response signals from any major power," Hayes reported, her voice growing cold with disbelief. "The Andrones have closed all communication channels. Federation has declared a communications blackout. Even the Proxima clans have gone dark." Wilson stared at the star maps, watching as red warning indicators spread across Zephyrian space. "Like a disease, they're all hiding," he said quietly. "Every last one of them knows about this Void Swarm and they're too scared to help." The general made a decision that would change human history forever. He activated Earth's emergency communication system, sending priority messages to every world government, every space command, and every military leader on the planet. Within 6 hours, representatives from every major nation were gathered in emergency session. The debate was fierce, but brief. Humanity had only been traveling between stars for 87 years. Their ships were small, and their weapons primitive compared to the great galactic powers. By all logical measures, sending Earth's fleet against an enemy that had terrified ancient civilizations into silence was complete madness. But as President Davis put it during that historic meeting, if we don't help them, who will? And if we let this happen now, what makes us think we won't be next? The decision was unanimous. Earth would answer the Zephyrians' call for help, even if no one else would. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the command station, watching something that had never happened before in human history. Every available spacecraft from Earth was gathering in a massive formation above the planet. It was a sight that would have been impossible just 5 years ago. But here they were, hundreds of ships preparing for humanity's first major military action beyond their solar system. The fleet was nothing like the sleek battle cruisers you'd see in the movies. Morrison could see the Denver, a massive asteroid mining ship that had been hauling rocks from the belt just last week.
Oh, yes.
Now it bristled with hastily welded missile pods and jury-rigged laser cannons. Next to it floated the research vessel Discovery, its scientific equipment replaced with torpedo tubes that the engineers swore would probably work in combat. Even Earth's luxury passenger liners had been pressed into service. The Star Princess, which used to ferry wealthy tourists to Mars, now carried Marine battalions and enough firepower to level a small city. Her captain had volunteered immediately when the call went out, saying that his grandfather had sailed merchant ships in World War II. He wasn't about to break the family tradition of answering the call when freedom was threatened. Amy Foster walked up beside Morrison, holding a data pad filled with intelligence reports that made for grim reading. She had been analyzing everything humanity knew about the Void Swarm, and the news wasn't good. Jake, I've been looking at these reports from the Zephyrian survivors. This enemy doesn't just destroy planets, they completely consume them. Talking about bioships the size of Manhattan that can literally eat starships? Morrison nodded grimly. He'd seen the footage too. Massive organic vessels that looked more like giant squids than spacecraft, their tentacles tearing apart Zephyrian. Crystal cities like they were made of paper. The swarm didn't use traditional weapons. Instead, they spat acid that could melt through hull armor and released clouds of spores that turned enemy crews into zombie-like drones. The worst part, Foster continued, is that every major galactic power has detailed files on these things. They've been watching the Void Swarm for centuries, documenting their attacks, studying their tactics, and not one of them has ever tried to stop them. Admiral Tom Carter's voice crackled over the intercom, calling all ship captains to report for the final briefing. The holographic conference room filled with the faces of humanity's finest cargo hauler captains, research scientists, mining, foremen, and career military officers, all united in purpose. Despite their vastly different backgrounds, Carter looked tired but determined as he addressed the group. I'm going to be straight with you all. According to every piece of intelligence we have, this mission is suicide. The Void Swarm has consumed 47 worlds in the past century. They've destroyed fleets that make ours look like a collection of paper airplanes, and drones have battleships that could vaporize our entire force in minutes, and even they won't fight these things. Captain Rodriguez of the Houston, a former oil platform worker turned spaceship pilot, spoke up. Are we doing this, Admiral? Carter's expression hardened. Because right now, there are billions of innocent people dying while the galaxy's greatest civilizations hide behind their borders and pretend it's not happening. The Zephyrians sent out a call for help and we're the only ones who answered. Maybe that makes us fools, but it also makes us human. The room fell silent as the weight of their decision settled in. These weren't professional soldiers preparing for a calculated military campaign. These were ordinary people, miners, scientists, traders, and explorers who had volunteered to face an enemy that terrified species with thousands of years of military experience. We leave in 6 hours, Carter announced. God help us all. As the fleet prepared for hyperspace jump, monitoring stations across the galaxy detected the human ship's departure. In the halls of the Andronan Parliament, senators watched the humans progress with quiet amazement. The Stellar Federation's military commanders studied the tactical data with professional curiosity. Even the warrior clans of Proxima observed the death march of the naive Deathworlders with something approaching respect. None of them expected to see the human fleet again. The hyperspace jump ended with a violent shudder that threw everyone against their restraints. Captain Jake Morrison felt his stomach drop as the New York emerged into normal space, and what he saw through the viewport made his blood run cold. The Zephyrian homeworld had once been called the crown jewel of the Outer Rim. Morrison had seen pictures of it in the galactic databases. A planet covered in cities made of living crystal that sparkled like diamonds in the light of their twin suns. The crystal towers used to sing in harmonious frequencies that could be heard from orbit, creating music that brought tears to the eyes of visiting diplomats. Now those towers lay in ruins. What remained of the crystal cities flickered weakly, their light fading like dying candles. The planet's surface was covered in a black, oily substance that pulsed and moved like something alive. And surrounding the world were the nightmare ships of the Void Swarm. Morrison had read the intelligence reports. But seeing these bioships in person was something else entirely. They weren't built, they had grown. Each vessel looked like a Massive sea creature adapted for space, with tentacles longer than city blocks and holes that breathed like living skin. The smallest of them dwarfed Earth's largest battleships. The biggest looked like floating mountains of flesh and bone. "Dear God," whispered Commander Foster from the weapons station. "The readings I'm getting? Some of those things are over. 20 kilometers long?" Pilot Nancy Rodriguez was leading the first wave of fighter squadrons when the swarm noticed the human fleet's arrival. Her voice crackled over the comm system, trying to maintain professional calm, even as terror crept into her words. "Command, these things are massive. My entire squadron could fit inside one of their weapon ports." The swarm's response was immediate and overwhelming. Organic missile pods opened along the bioship's sides, launching projectiles that moved like living creatures through space. Instead of metal and explosives, these weapons were made of acidic tissue that could eat through armor plating like it was paper. Rodriguez's fighter squadron scattered as the first volley approached. "Evasive maneuvers," she shouted, but there was nowhere to run. The biomissiles tracked their targets with frightening intelligence, adjusting course to intercept the fleeing fighters. The first human casualties came within minutes of engagement. The research ship Explorer took a direct hit from a plasma burst that punched clean through its hull. The crew didn't even have time to scream before their atmosphere vented into space. The mining barge Colorado lasted longer, its thick industrial armor holding up against the acid weapons until a cluster of biomissiles overwhelmed its defenses. Morrison watched his fleet being torn apart and felt the weight of every life lost. These weren't trained military personnel. They were volunteers who had left behind families and careers. The freight captain of the Texas had 3 kids waiting for him back on Earth. The chief engineer of the Phoenix was supposed to get married next month, but as Morrison prepared to order a retreat, something extraordinary happened. The humans didn't break. Captain Williams of the damaged cargo hauler Chicago came over the comm, his ship trailing atmosphere and debris, but still firing its makeshift weapons. Admiral Carter, requesting permission to ram that big ugly thing. "On your starboard side." "Permission denied, Captain," Carter's voice replied firmly. "Get your people to the escape pods." "Sir, with respect, my ship's already dead. Might as well make it count for something." The Chicago was a converted freight hauler with a crew of 38 civilians who had never seen combat before this day. As Morrison watched, the wounded ship turned toward a biovessel 10 times its size and pushed its engines to maximum burn. The collision tore the swarm ship in half, its organic hull splitting open like a ripe fruit. The explosion lit up local space and sent shock waves through the nearby bioships, causing them to recoil in what looked almost like pain. Morrison realized this was his moment. All ships were going down swinging. Target the big ones and ram, if you have to. Rodriguez's fighter squadron, reduced to half its original numbers, dove toward a cluster of smaller bioships. "Copy that, command. These things want to eat planets. Let's give them some indigestion." The battle became a nightmare of close-quarters combat. Human ships, outgunned and outmatched, threw themselves at enemies that should have crushed them. In minutes, the mining ship Denver used its industrial lasers to slice through bioship tentacles. The liner Star Princess turned its passenger corridors into marine barracks and launched boarding parties at damaged swarm vessels, for the first time in thousands of years. The Void Swarm encountered something they had never faced before: prey. That fought back with absolute determination. These humans didn't retreat when outmatched, didn't surrender when defeat was certain. They kept fighting until their ships were destroyed and their crews were dead, and that changed everything. Colonel Rachel Bennett kicked down the airlock door and stepped into hell. The interior of the damaged swarm bioship was like nothing she had ever encountered in 20 years of military service. The walls weren't made of metal or plastic. They were living tissue that pulsed with a sickly green light. The air was thick with toxic gases that would have killed most alien species in seconds. But humans weren't most alien species. "Masks are holding up fine," Bennett reported to her squad of Marines as they moved through the organic corridors. "Whatever this atmosphere is made of, our filters are handling it no problem." Behind her, Sergeant Mike Torres checked his readings and shook his head in amazement. "Ma'am, according to my scanner, this air is loaded with enough poison to kill a horse." The radiation levels would cook most species in minutes. But our suits are barely registering any stress. Bennett smiled grimly inside her helmet. Yeah, the galactic civilizations had always called humans Deathworlders, like it was an insult. They couldn't understand how any intelligent life could evolve on a planet as hostile as Earth. Most inhabited worlds in the galaxy were garden paradises with perfect temperatures. Clean air and gentle radiation from stable stars. Earth was different. Humans had evolved on a world that was constantly trying to kill them. They had survived ice ages, supervolcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and radiation bursts from solar flares. Their bodies had adapted to handle toxins, radiation, and atmospheric conditions that would be lethal to creatures from safer worlds. Now, for the first time, that deadly heritage was proving to be an advantage. Dr. Kevin Walsh was analyzing samples. From the bioship's atmosphere, when he made a startling discovery, "Colonel, you need to hear this. Swarm creatures use pheromones as a weapon. They release fear chemicals that are supposed to paralyze their enemies with terror," and Bennett asked, cutting through another section of living wall with her plasma torch. "And they're not working on us at all." Walsh's voice carried excitement mixed with disbelief. "Human brain chemistry is too different. Other species in the galaxy just smells bad to us." Meanwhile, back on the main human fleet, an even more remarkable transformation was taking place. The surviving Zephyrian refugees had been brought aboard human ships, and their crystal shapers were working alongside human engineers to create something entirely new. Chief Engineer Lisa Park stood in the workshop of the New York watching as a Zephyrian crystal shaper named Velmiron grew living energy conduits directly into the ship's weapon systems. "This is incredible," Park muttered, running her hands along the crystal formations. "These things can channel pure energy with almost no loss." Valmiron's crystalline form chimed softly in response. "Your people's weapons are crude but effective. Together, perhaps we can create something that can truly hurt the swarm." What emerged from this partnership was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human military ships equipped with Zephyrian crystal technology could now fire energy beams that could punch through bioship armor like tissue paper. But more importantly, human tactical thinking combined with alien technology created weapon systems that were completely unpredictable. Lieutenant Amy Foster was coordinating the defense of a group of refugee ships when she noticed something crucial about the enemy's behavior. "Admiral Carter, I'm seeing a pattern here. The swarm attacks in perfect formations, uses identical tactics across all their ships, and responds to threats in exactly the same way every time." Carter's voice crackled back over the com. "What are you getting at, Lieutenant?" "They're a hive. Mine, sir, are incredibly efficient and coordinated, but they can't handle chaos. Watch this." Foster ordered 3 human ships to break formation and attack from completely different angles, using random weapons patterns. The result was immediate and dramatic. The swarm bioships programmed to respond to logical military tactics couldn't process the seemingly insane human approach. They hesitated, confused by enemies who attacked in ways that made no tactical sense. Captain Rodriguez, now piloting a hybrid fighter equipped with crystal weapons, took advantage of the confusion. All fighters ignore standard attack patterns. Be as crazy and unpredictable as possible. These things can't handle it when we don't follow the rules. The tide of battle began to turn as humanity's greatest strength became clear. It wasn't their technology, their firepower, or their tactical brilliance. It was their absolute refusal to give up when any logical species would surrender. Other galactic civilizations fought wars with careful planning, measured responses, and strategic retreats when the odds were unfavorable. Humans fought like their entire species depended on victory, because in their minds, it did. They threw themselves at impossible odds with creativity born from desperation and stubbornness that bordered on insanity. The Void Swarm had conquered dozens of worlds because they had never faced an enemy that would ram damaged ships into their biovessels, board their ships through toxic atmospheres, or combine alien technology with human recklessness to create weapons that shouldn't exist. We're about to learn why the galaxy called humans Deathworlders, The dawn came slowly over the Zephyrian homeworld, but it wasn't the gentle sunrise the crystal beings remembered from better days. The twin suns struggled to shine through the thick clouds of bio-waste that the void swarm had pumped into the atmosphere. What light managed to filter through cast everything in a sickly green glow that made the ruined crystal cities look like tombstones in an ancient graveyard. Admiral Tom Carter stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Earth's Hope, and watched as the final phase of their desperate mission began. His ship had been transformed over the past week of constant fighting. Where once there had been standard human weapons, now there were crystalline energy projectors that hummed with alien power. The hull was reinforced with living crystal that the Zephyrian survivors had grown directly into the metal, creating a hybrid vessel that represented something entirely new in the galaxy. The combined human-Zephyrian fleet that surrounded Carter's flagship was a sight that would have been impossible to imagine just months ago. Human destroyers flew alongside Zephyrian crystal ships, their crews working together as if they had been allies for centuries instead of strangers who had met during the worst crisis either species had ever faced. At the center of the Zephyrian system loomed their target, the swarm's command hive ship. It was a monstrosity beyond description, a bio-vessel so massive that it had its own gravitational field. Smaller swarm ships orbited around it like parasites around a host, creating a defensive network that had never been breached in the creature's thousand-year existence. Carter activated the fleet-wide communication system, knowing that these might be the last words many of his people would ever hear. All ships, this is Admiral Carter. In a few minutes, we're going to attempt something that every military expert in the galaxy says is impossible. We're going to destroy the swarm's command structure and save what's left of the Zephyrian people. He paused, looking out at the stars that held so many civilizations hiding in fear. But we're not just fighting for the Zephyrians today. We're fighting for everyone who's ever sent out a cry for help and been ignored. We're fighting for the idea that when someone needs you, you show up. Even if you're scared. Even if the odds are impossible. Even if the smart thing to do is run away and hide. Captain Nancy Rodriguez was leading the first wave of hybrid fighters, her squadron now equipped with weapons that combined human nuclear warheads with Zephyrian crystal technology. The combination created weapons of devastating power that could punch through bioship armor like it was made of paper. All fighters. This is Rodriguez, she broadcast to her pilots. Remember what these things did to 47 worlds? Remember the billions of innocent people who died while the galaxy's great powers sat on their hands and did nothing? Today we make them pay for every life they took. The attack began with a coordinated assault that pushed the boundaries of what both human and Zephyrian technology could achieve. Crystal-enhanced missiles tore through the outer defensive ring, while human fighters used their chaotic attack patterns to confuse the swarm's hive mind responses. But the real breakthrough came when Rodriguez's squadron reached the hive ship itself. The massive bio-vessel was protected by layers of organic armor that had never been penetrated. But the humans had developed a solution that was typically human in its brutal simplicity. Target acquired, Rodriguez announced as her fighter dove toward the hive ship's central nerve cluster. This is for every world you consumed, you bastards. She released her payload, a cluster of nuclear warheads that had been wrapped in specially grown Zephyrian crystal matrices. The crystals focused and amplified the nuclear explosions, turning them into energy, weapons of unimaginable power. The chain reaction that followed was visible from anywhere in the star system. The hive ship's central nervous system, the brain, that controlled the entire void swarm, simply ceased to exist in a blast of pure energy that outshone both of the Zephyrian suns. Across the galaxy, every remaining swarm bioship suddenly stopped what it was doing. The hive mind that had coordinated their attacks for millennia was gone, leaving behind individual creatures that had no idea how to function without their collective consciousness. Like ants whose queen had been killed, they scattered in confusion, fleeing into the depths of space where they would pose no threat to anyone. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time in over a century, the Void Swarm was no longer a threat to galactic civilization. And the beings responsible for this miracle were humans. the primitive Deathworlders. Every major power had dismissed as irrelevant. Elder Beltarian, one of the few surviving leaders of the Zephyrian Collective, approached Admiral Carter as rescue operations began across their devastated homeworld. Her crystalline form flickered with colors that human translators interpreted as profound gratitude mixed with amazement. "Admiral Carter," she said, her voice like wind chimes made of starlight. "When we sent our desperate message into the void, we had lost all hope. Every great civilization in the galaxy had turned away from our pleas. We thought we would die alone and forgotten." Carter nodded, feeling the weight of every life that had been saved and every life that had been lost in the process. "Elder, when someone calls for help, you answer. That's not complicated. That's just being a decent neighbor in a big, dangerous universe." Word of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy faster than any hyperspace message. In the halls of the Andronan Parliament, senators who had voted to ignore the Zephyrian crisis now watched in stunned silence.
Nice.
As footage of the battle played on their screens, the Stellar Federation's military commanders studied the tactical reports with professional amazement, trying to understand how a species with less than a century of space travel had accomplished what their 1,000-year-old military couldn't. But the message that echoed through every star system was simple and clear. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, and they would answer when anyone cried for help. The age of hiding behind borders and ignoring the suffering of others was over. The Deathworlders had taught the galaxy what it meant to be heroes.